my God, that throttle steer was immense. Jesus. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are in a Civic Type R limited edition. These are actually very rare. There's only 1,020 units sold worldwide, and 600 of those are in the US. This car is number 166. The MSRP of the limited edition is $45,000, which is about $6,500 more than the regular Type R. They all come in this beautiful Phoenix yellow paint, and there are no changes to the engine. It's still a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, making 306 horsepower at 6,500 RPM and 295 foot-pounds at 2,500 RPM. They really focused on weight savings, shaving it down 50 pounds from 3,100 pounds to 3,050 pounds. Nearly 30 of that comes from removing sound deadening material, and then 4.5 pounds reduced from each corner's wheels, and that's, of course, unsprung mass, which is good for handling. We now have these forged aluminum BBS 20-inch wheels, which are wrapped in Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires versus the original's Continental Sport Contact 6, and that saves 1 pound per corner. They really cared about the weight savings, folks. Other changes, we have a slightly heavier steering feel due to a retuned EPS, and the adaptive damper stiffness has been increased at every single level. In terms of mods, the car is mostly stock. We have a CR intercooler, PRL intake, and Jay's racing grille for aesthetics. With that being said, let's see how this bad boy drives. Now on this bumpy road, I'm using it in sport mode, not R, because I can't separate the throttle from the suspension settings, and this road's just too bumpy. I wish I could have the Type R throttle and the sport suspension setting, but we can't do that. Now right off the bat, this is a front-engined, front-wheel drive car that was not built from the ground up as a sports car. This was a Civic that was then tuned to be sporty. So you gotta keep that in mind. It's super practical. The owner has his child seat in the rear, but you have to come in with that expectation. You're not comparing this to something like a Porsche Cayman, right? For many reasons. Now there is auto rev match, but I found that if I rely on the auto rev match, it's actually a little bit jerky. It's not as smooth as something like a Cayman GT4's auto rev match. But that's okay, I don't like rev match anyways. I wasn't able to disable it, but to get the smoothest downshifts, I need to manually do it anyways. Now as an FF car, the torque steer is very noticeable. From the reviews I had seen, I thought they had really sorted out the torque steer. But you definitely feel it. It doesn't pull you too hard, but it gets heavier, right? Because you're loading up those front wheels. And it makes it more difficult to be as laser sharp precise, because it's tugging you here and there ever so slightly. But one thing that's really nice with FF is it is incredible how early I can get on the throttle on corner exit. I don't need to worry about oversteer with throttle input. And I'm just getting pulled in a straight line forward, which is kind of nice. That's new. That's not something that you really experience every day with other sports cars. Now, of course, as a Honda, the transmission in this is sublime. I mean, I still prefer the Honda S2000's transmission, but this is pretty damn good. Yeah, see a little bit of torque steer on throttle input. Yeah, the brakes are great. I like cars like this where as soon as you get into them, you feel confident pushing them a little bit. Now obviously I'm not going 10/10ths, but the brakes, the steering feedback, not the best rack in the world, and part of that is because it's front engine, front wheel drive. When you're powering the front wheels, you lose a little bit of that communication, that fine tuning of feedback. And then also with the throttle input, you can't really trust how much the steering is loading up, because a lot of that is influenced by how much throttle you're giving the car. But when you keep those two considerations in mind, the steering is pretty good. Again, how early I can get on the throttle is that's so unique. Now, even though the car is only 3,050 pounds, it feels a little bit larger to me, right? I mean, this is obviously a bigger car for a 4-door, 5-seater, big trunk. but it doesn't feel as light and nimble as something like a purpose-built sports car. And again, that's because this wasn't built from the ground up to be a sports car. They're taking a economy vehicle and sprucing it up. Now the nice thing when you have front-wheel drive is you're not as concerned about throttle-induced, power oversteer. And for that reason, the turbo lag is definitely noticeable. And I love me some spoolie boy noises, but it's not as bothersome in a car like this because with front-wheel drive, I don't have to be as delicate, as precise with throttle input mid-corner. Yeah, even in sport mode, this is pretty rough. This is, again, they've made everything a little bit more hardcore compared to the regular Type R. So we're bouncing around a lot. Great brakes, yes. Oh my god, that throttle steer was immense. Jesus. So overall, the inputs. Throttle, I mean, a little bit of lag, obviously once you're spooled up, not as much, very minimal, not nearly as noticeable. Brakes feel great, I can easily modulate them. I'm inspired with, I feel confident pushing the brakes a little bit. The gear selector, I mean, it's a Honda gear selector. Need I say more? I mean, everyone loves Honda gear selectors. These transmissions are just phenomenal. Again, not quite as good as the S2000, but very, very, very good. And then the steering, you guys know I'm a sucker for good steering racks. This is decent, but because it is front-wheel drive, you're losing a lot of that communication. You don't have that high resolution that you get with a rear-wheel drive car. Overall, if you want a single-purpose vehicle, which is sporty, which is practical, which can, have your kids in the back, then I see why the Type R is so popular. When you look at the legacy of this car, you have to decide whether it, lives up to that or not. And for me personally, not a car that I would get as a single dual purpose, because to me, a big part of driving engagement and driving enjoyment is having that rear-wheel drive power, having that little bit of throttle-induced power oversteer. A car like this is fun. It's actually great. I feel like this is the pinnacle of what you can really do with a front-engine, front-wheel drive car. And what Honda has done is extremely impressive. But you have to ask yourself, what are your priorities? Again, if you prioritize practicality, then you'll probably consider this car a little bit more seriously. But if you're like me, single dude, and you focus more on the driving engagement and driving enjoyment of the vehicle, then there are some limitations with a FF platform. It's just physics, guys. You can't fight physics. And part of the reason Honda was able to get so much in terms of handling out of an FF platform was because they focus on the really important things. They have a limited slip differential up front, right? They have double wishbone suspension. So overall, they're giving the car every advantage it could possibly get. And of course, they're engineering it phenomenally. Now, if you are looking at this from a daily driver perspective, you probably want to get the regular Type R, not the limited edition. This is, again, 166, and this is more hardcore. There's even less sound deadening. It's going to be pretty noisy day to day going on the highway. I have not driven the original Type R. I've only driven this limited edition, but my understanding is that this is a more hardcore version, a little bit more focused, if you will. As for the looks, very polarizing. You either love it or hate it, but still, in the end, a very special car. Thanks for watching, my friends. Much love, and I'll see you guys in that next one.